Welcome into the Five on the Floor podcast on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Before we get to today's episode, I want to tell you about a great sponsor of the network and of this podcast, and that is AutoNation. You're familiar with AutoNation. If you're looking to buy or sell a vehicle, AutoNation is where you want to go. They're the largest auto retailer from coast to coast, and of course, they have locations all over South Florida. Their friendly and knowledgeable staff here in South Florida will help you save big on a huge selection of new cars, trucks, and SUVs. Toyota, Honda, Chevrolet, Mercedes-Benz, and much, much more. And if you're looking to buy pre-owned, shop AutoNation's huge selection of one-price pre-owned vehicles. They're all clearly marked with one price, their lowest price guaranteed. Or if you want to get rid of that old car, turn it into cash today, get a top dollar offer, and a check the very same day. They'll buy your car with no purchase necessary. Is your check engine light on? Right now, get the services you need at low AutoNation prices, oil changes, tires, batteries, and more. All for less. Call or visit AutoNation.com to schedule your appointment today. And one more thing, if you're in the market for a new car, DM me at 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. That's at the number 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. And I'll give an AutoNation senior manager your info so they can reach out to you directly and walk you through the buying process. That's AutoNation, AutoNation.com. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome into the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm Ethan Skolnick. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. That's at 5 Reasons Sports. That's the number 5. And also, obviously, check out our website, 5reasonsports.com. That is spelled out F-I-V-E. We make it very complicated for you. Make sure that you check that out because once heat season starts, I'll be writing again. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a thing. Anyway, yesterday we got into Bradley Beal for the Miami Heat and what the options are there. There's been a little bit of news there today. I guess the Wizards are making it clear through Woj that they don't want to trade him. I mean, why would you say you wanted to trade him? I don't know why this is news today, but anyway. But today, Alf and I are going to go to another expert opinion, or at least an expert opinion, because neither of us are experts. We're going to go to Clay Ferraro from WPLG Channel 10. I love how this comes into, Clay, because you don't come in here on our little Zoom link. By the way, buy the stock because I own it. As Clay, you come in as Clayton. How many people call you Clayton?
Well, my wife does. She thinks the Clay thing. She's like, wait a minute. I always knew you was Clayton before. Where's this Clay stuff coming from? I don't know. So it's like one of those things where I guess the people closest to you call you one thing and you're known as the other. But yeah. So I guess that's why it pops up. But by the way, guys, I mean, if you're looking for an expert, I'll go find one for you. I mean, I don't
is
know.
Will there?
The right place
Will's actually look. I don't want to insult you, Clay, because I love you. I do watch Channel 10. I wish you guys would invite me on there, but that's a whole nother story. But so I've had to go on 7 because I never hear from you guys. But I'm just it's interesting because I did reach out to Will on another matter, and then something came up, and I said, hey, you want to come on the podcast with us again? Because Will's done it a couple times, but he's not currently in Florida, as far as I know.
Manso is in Montana, and
right.
He's been sending us pictures from there, and I actually thought for a while that he was going to stay, that he wasn't going to come back. He was sending us pictures of there literally buffalo roaming out there, and pictures of deer and all sorts of nature, all that good stuff. Unfortunately, they don't have salty donuts out there, and so he sent us a text back, and he said, "That's it. That was a deal breaker right there." So he'll be back.
Do they even have a news station out there?
No, that's actually, believe it or not, Alf, that's actually why he went up there, or part of the reason why he went up there. First off, he wanted to show his family the first market he ever worked in, but he also went back and visited the station, and so it wasn't just getting a feel for the area. But he visited the station up there. I guess it's Missoula, Montana. And funny enough, the main anchor, who was the anchor when he was there, 20 years ago, is still the main anchor there. So yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. And I came here. I came to Florida from Idaho Falls. I was in Fort Myers for a while in between those two. So, it's a different world up there in a number of ways. But I'm sure you guys will get some pictures and all that stuff when he gets back.
They have a television up there, like not just television station, like a television.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, it's black and white TV. I think they haven't quite come into color yet. Maybe HD in like 30 years or so, but slowly but surely.
Well, they simulcast on the transistor radio, so
That's right.
the whole family gathers around.
Well, unless I fix my mic, my podcasts are going to sound like that. So I promise people that the mics are getting fixed. One more question before we get to the Heat here. A lot of people have noticed that our buddy George Sedano and Will look alike on some pictures on Instagram and other places. So, Clay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's better looking?
Let's see. Since I've never met George in person, believe it.
You've never met George in person? How is that possible?
No. I got here, I think, the year after he left.
Okay.
And I think he may have been at a couple of games that I was at, but I was covering one part and Manso was covering the other. So I'll just have to lean towards Will by default, especially since I have to deal with him on a daily basis. And but yeah, he's the one thing I can say about Will. He's just got this musk, this scent, and I think that would put him over the top. And
he's also a much nicer person, which makes him more attractive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. George is an asshole. I agree with that.
Really?
Completely
really?
True. Nah, he's one of my best friends, but he's an asshole. And he'll be listening to this because he was listening to the podcast from the other day and wanted to know why I was doing it from a closet. So again, people, I apologize for this. Mike is getting fixed. I'm not a technical person, but we're going to move on to the content. All right, so here's what we want to talk to Clay about. We talked about Bradley Beal a lot and all the rest, but I want to put this in the context of the market, which is something that we've done before on this podcast when it was in its previous iteration, which is that going into this offseason, I feel like the Heat had fallen off their perch in South Florida. Not that there wasn't a certain amount of trust that they could figure things out, but after 25 years of being clearly the model organization in town, there were some questions about whether they'd lost their way. And it looked like the Dolphins and the Marlins, they're going to be bad for a while, but at least they have a direction. I don't even know about I can't tell you about the Panthers because every time I get excited about the Panthers, they screw the thing up. I feel like they've done good things this offseason, but I'm probably wrong. But those two franchises and the Hurricanes, to a certain degree, there was excitement over Manny Diaz, where you could even look at it and say, of those four, that maybe the Heat were kind of in the weirdest spot of the four because they didn't have a clear direction. Clay, do you think that what they've done this offseason, getting Jimmy Butler, drafting Tyler Herro, which looks like, if not a home run, it certainly looks like at least a double, do you think that has put them back where they were?
I do, at least close. And I think you're right, by the way. I do think they had fallen off of that perch. And look, let's be honest, deservedly so. When you look at the contracts that they gave out, and they were able to trade Tyler Johnson, but essentially you were chipping away at your mistakes that you had made little by little. You've still got James Johnson's contract on your books. I happen to think Dion Waiters is going to have a much better season. Obviously, getting healthy, and I just think his frame of mind. We got to talk to him the other day, and so I think he's going to be better this year on the floor. But look, they had fallen off of that perch by their own doing. And I think a lot of times you do need a little luck. And in this case, I think the luck was thanks to number 3 in Dwayne Wade and the recruiting that he's done over the last few years with Jimmy Butler. But part of that luck was set in motion by Pat Riley smoothing over the relationship with Dwayne Wade a couple of years ago, bringing him back and kind of showing that Dwayne, I mean, you are still this organization moving forward. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Some of the other names that we're hearing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as the podcast goes on, are all guys who have some sort of connection with Dwayne Wade. They could potentially come to South Florida. You're talking about Victor Oladipo and Bradley Beal, who grew up admiring Dwayne Wade. So, I do think that was a huge part of this. But, you mentioned the Jimmy Butler move, and obviously that was the catalyst with all of this. If that doesn't happen, then we're not even having this conversation. But, guys, I'll tell you the thing that kind of stuck out with me. It wasn't just the positive moves that Pat Riley made and this organization made. It was the one they didn't make. It was the Russell Westbrook trade that they didn't make. And I'll be completely honest here. I was up there standing on the couch, if you want to be Tom Cruise. I was standing up on the table yelling, "Yeah, make this happen. Let's be relevant again."
You and
South
Ethan.
Florida.
You and Ethan.
Yeah. No, seriously though. I mean, but it was fully known. And look, being completely honest, hey, we're the ABC station down here. When the Heat are relevant, business is good for us. So I think we looked at Russell Westbrook, understood, hey, it may not be the best basketball fit, but relevancy-wise, man, you're relevant instantly. Pat Riley, though, I think showed a level of patience, a measure of patience that we haven't seen in quite some time. When you started to hear what Oklahoma City was asking for in this trade, I think, look, if Pat Riley had just opened up the roster and said, yeah, sure, take Bam, take Tyler Herro, and whatever picks we are, let it just give us Russell, then I think you start to wonder, okay, maybe he doesn't have the championship in mind. But I think what we saw is, number one, there are other people in that organization who are kind of, I don't want to say holding him in check, but at least he may be listening to some of those other voices in the organization. But also, I think it showed he doesn't care about relevancy as much as he cares about championships. And instead of kind of making the impulsive move to give whatever it took to get Russell Westbrook, he did the smart, patient thing to build a championship roster and kind of wait for a better fit to come along.
Clay, it's funny when you say that, because if you look at the Butler trade, if he had acquiesced to what Tibbs wanted, Thibodeau back in whenever the trades were going on in February, January, if he had acquiesced at that point, he would have gave him a lot more than he did this summer. I pointed this out on Twitter the other day. What Tibbs got for Butler is Robert Covington, who they're trying to get rid of, and Dario Saric. Yep. So Riley's patience has actually paid off already once, and I think it's going to pay off again when we see what Russell Westbrook is in another year and a half with that contract. So
yeah, and Alf, not to interrupt you, I agree with you 100%. I think we all kind of knew that the Russell Westbrook situation was one where it was like, okay, you're essentially buying a really expensive lottery ticket and hoping that somehow the talent is going to outweigh the question of fit and all of the the lack of efficiency and everything.
I compared it to a used boat.
That's another good one.
Everybody wants a boat, but do you really want a boat, man? Because after you get the boat, you got to clean the boat, you got to find somewhere to put the boat.
Yeah,
you got to maintain the boat.
Yeah, and by the way, I think I was less concerned about the personality stuff because I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to Jimmy Butler on the JJ Redick podcast. This was a few months ago after the Sixers had picked him up, and it was really interesting listening in real time. JJ Redick kind of coming to an understanding of who Jimmy Butler is. And he admitted, look, when I saw the stuff that was going down in Minnesota, I was like, oh, really? Like this is who we're bringing into the locker room? And then once he got to know him, he was like, oh, this is a guy who's smart. This is a guy who busts his rear end. And if he yells at you, it's in the heat of competition because he knows what's supposed to be getting done. Well, I think somebody like Russell Westbrook, somebody who is that passionate about winning, I don't think that would have been a problem. And by the way, I also think that's why the Heat are so open to essentially turning over the keys of the franchise to Jimmy Butler right now, because they understand his reputation comes from a place of wanting to win and knowing the game. But man, you're dead on. I just think that sometimes the best deals are the ones that you don't make. And you look back at what they would have had to give up to Minnesota. They don't have Tyler Herro right now. If they make that deal, they likely don't have Kelly Olynyk. Obviously we heard different iterations of that deal, but I think the ones that were pretty consistent was Richardson, Olynyk, and a first-round pick. And instead, you're able to make that deal for something that's a lot less painful. And now you're looking at a roster where you could be pretty darn competitive in the East, talking 4, 5, 6 seed. But then also you've got some guys there that you could potentially make another move if something pops.
Well, the biggest thing I've taken away from this is they love Bam Adebayo. If you go back to last year, not putting him on the table with Minnesota, even when you needed Jimmy Butler at the time, really, because they knew that roster was a mess last year. They knew it in training camp. They had guys going in and out. They were holding certain players out. Spoelstra had 32 players he had to try to find minutes for, and plus Dwayne's retirement tour. It was a total mess. It's a season that you're not going to remember for more than 3 minutes, and they're all Dwayne.
Yep. And you're exactly right.
And that's really it. And you look at Heat seasons, like, there are some years that are just forgettable, right? I mean, 14-15 was forgettable. 2001, 2002 was forgettable. Most of 2007, 2008 was not forgettable because you never thought you would see the Heat pulling 65 guys from the then D League, playing Kasib Powell 38 minutes and tanking, which is what they had to do once. They didn't plan on doing it when the season started, but they did once the season began and fell apart. But, look, the biggest thing that I take from all of this is they just they view Bam as a future star center, and maybe even now, because if you look at what Spoelstra's talked about with him, it's all been about, he was a top 5 center once he was a starter last year, and the numbers bear that out. Like, I mean, we can talk about he's not putting up 23 and 13 yet, but if you just look on a per minute basis, and the other thing is the makeup. And Alf and I talked about this on the last a couple podcasts ago, but Udonis Haslem putting out a love letter to him on Instagram, which, I mean, UD does that for people. UD's gotten very emotional as the years have gone on, which I appreciate how human.
That's what happens when you have kids, man. This
is true.
It is. And I don't, and Alf, you can speak to that directly for what, I mean, UD's good people in every possible.
Every single, he did something very special for my family. So yes, I do appreciate the mayor of Miami, UD.
Yeah, and he has for me as well. And so but for him to go out there so openly and anoint Bam Adebayo as the next one.
He can't be traded now.
Right, you can't. Right, he's a made man, right? Like he's a made man. Like, you can't. So that's Clay. I agree with you that they showed restraint in this case. I was pushing for the Westbrook trade. I was pushing for it because partially because I'm selfish and I wanted the downloads, but also because I thought that putting the combustible combination of Butler and Westbrook might actually be crazy enough to work. And I think what you said earlier about competitiveness, the traits, and I talked about this and I wrote about this, and then I talked to people in Las Vegas and they told me I was right about this. The traits that other teams don't like about players, the Heat love those traits. And they love, like, this idea that, like, you would fine a player for acting out in practice against another player. No. Pat will buy you dinner. Okay.
Yeah.
And that the things that they value, the players that they value, the intensity. Remember, this organization was put on the map by Alonzo Mourning, who is a player who could not go 3 games without getting a technical. Okay, like, this was the big issue when he was signed. So they are not afraid of that type of player. They are afraid of players who don't care enough. That's what they're afraid of, and they've had some of those lately. And so I think what you're looking at now is a couple things. One, I do think he showed restraint. I do think that they're kind of waiting tactically for the next guy to say he wants to be out, but in a way that the other team is so compromised they can't do anything but send him to Miami. Maybe it's Bradley Beal. Who knows? But I also think what they have shown is they don't see Bam Adebayo as a complementary piece. They see Bam Adebayo as part of a potential big 3, okay, with 2 other stars, and that's the piece they want to keep. And so that's been the most instructive thing to me about this offseason.
Well, and a few things. The thing about Bam that I find really interesting, and I actually commented on this to our producer, Dookie Line, the other night, watching him just grow up, I think, over the last couple of years since he got here. And look, we all did. That's such an age of maturation. And I think people forget he was, 19, 20 when he walked in down here, 20
19
years old.
He started as a 19-year-old.
Yeah. So I remember being out at his introductory news conference, and he was young. He was much like Tyler Herro was a couple of weeks ago when we were out there for that, and you could tell there was just there was kind of a man. I'm just trying to see what's next here, and this is kind of new with the media. Not that, obviously being at Kentucky, you talk to the media, but hey, this is major market media. This is a bit different. To where now we've had interactions with him, and he is so comfortable. He is, I think he's starting to get to a place, and it's the old saying, being comfortable in your own skin. And I think, I remember I went through that growing up, and I'm sure you guys remember similarly. There were points in your lives where you kind of realized, hey, I don't care what people think about me anymore. I'm going to be who I am. And so I really, it was at his camp the other day, hearing him talk, and man, that you're starting to see his personality. You're starting to see somebody who is very comfortable. And I think part of that, guys, is I think he knows now what they feel about him. I think he knows as well that there's a confidence growing there. And part of it, I really think towards the end of last year, there's a saying in college football with guys, and it typically happens with really good players around the end of their second year, where you say the light started to go on for them. And it's that growth process. And I thought especially, guys, and here's another cliche, that the game starts to slow down for some guys. It's another cliche from football. But I thought especially last year, guys, towards the end of the year, when Bam got at the rim, when he got to the rim, his first year and a half or so, he didn't seem to know what to do if he couldn't dunk it. And then I felt like towards the end of last year, you started to see the touch around the rim a bit more. You started to see some of that work that he's put in practice, the post moves that he's worked on, starting to work. Some of the moves around the basket, the touch, and kind of figuring it out, the game slowing down. So I think all of this has kind of come full circle to where you're seeing the confidence in Bam Adebayo, not just on the floor, but also off of it. And I think you combine him with Jimmy Butler. That's going to be big. And I think you have two guys that care, Alf.
And Clay, you also saw the touch on the jump shot. You've seen this offseason, some of these videos that they put out. You see some of that Chris Bosh influence. Like, he did a move the other day, and I swore it was Chris, right? With the extent.
Which one was that?
The one he had the little headsy jab step.
Yes.
Came around, and the extension on the layup. I was like, is that Chris or is that Bam? It was beautiful. It was beautiful to see. And the thing is, when you look at that kid, and I call him a kid because I'm old. You look at that kid, you watch him play. And you just see how he's absorbed so many things from different guys around him, and you can just tell he's just a sponge. He just wants to be as good as as good as he possibly can be, and that's why when Ethan and I were talking about it the other day, we were saying because we were talking about Beal, but we did put a big emphasis on Winslow and Bam. Because I think if you watch what Toronto did this year, and I want your opinion on this, when you watch what Toronto did this year, those kind of guys, those winning players, right? They may not be your number one, number two, but those winning guys on the floor, they can go a long way into winning a championship. And I think keeping Winslow and keeping Bam around this organization are going to be integral for them to continue to grow. And when they bring in that second superstar, then maybe, yes, Bam ascends to another level, and then you have a guy like Winslow who will play defense and plays his heart out every single night. I think you start seeing the building blocks of a championship team.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head too, and those winning players are vital to a championship team, right? But they can't necessarily be your number one guy. And I think that was the problem with the Heat over the last year or so, was they were trying to make Josh Richardson somebody he's not. By the way, I think Josh Richardson, I think he's going to be
great on fit. I said it before. I love his fit in Philadelphia.
Yes, dead on. But man, when you try to make him the number one guy, the go-to guy. I remember standing there talking to Pat Riley when he was doing he was doing something to help refurbish a veteran's home. And of course, Pat's always gracious and takes basketball questions, these things. And somebody made the comment about Josh Richardson, and he said, "You guys keep calling him a go-to guy. Don't do that. Don't make him the go-to guy. Let this be organic." Well, I mean, part of the reason why we called him the go-to guy was because that's kind of what the Heat were trying to make him. And so I think when you watched him towards the end of games, you realize that's just not him. He's going to be a phenomenal number 4 or number 5 on a championship team. He's going to be one of those winning players, a really good 3-and-D guy, assuming he keeps growing with that shot. But he's not going to be the guy to get his own shot at the end of games. Now, you get somebody like Jimmy Butler, the alpha, the number 1, a guy who, when you watch the Sixers in the playoffs, who was the guy that they wanted the ball in his hands in those big spots? It was Jimmy.
It wasn't Ben Simmons because he can't shoot.
Yeah, that's right.
He's a coward.
But now you've got Jimmy Butler, and all of a sudden those guys who couldn't necessarily be number ones, they could be really, really good number threes and number fours. And I think that's what you're getting at. And with the way this team is constructed right now, it just feels like they're missing that dynamic scoring two guard, a guy who can shoot. And I think that's why we keep going back to Bradley Beal, because he'd just be the ultimate fit there. But yeah, I mean, to your point, those guys who are perfect complementary pieces now have somebody that they can complement in Jimmy Butler, and hopefully the Heat are able to add another guy like that.
Well, and that's why I always say, that the strategy for the Heat is, get the stars and figure it the F out later. And that's because pieces do start to fall in place. And, when you can't have what they had last year, which is an ensemble cast of B- players. I mean, it's just there's you don't know who's supposed to play with who at what point. Nothing filters in correctly. The players don't know their roles. They start competing with each other in a negative way instead of in a positive way. It's very different. Jimmy comes here. He's the star. Now, I want to transition to Beal a little bit, and I want to address a couple of things that came up about our episode yesterday, Alf. And maybe Clay can jump in on some of this stuff. So first thing, when we were talking about the best two guards in the league, we forgot C.J. McCollum. So I apologize because I feel like everybody forgets C.J. McCollum. Like, that's just what happens. But we probably should have mentioned him. We did mention Oladipo. But I put this on Twitter today, and I'm going to tell you, I don't agree with this. I said, Clay, your opinion on this. I asked with an appropriate name, although I don't think his full name is Clayton with a K. I put who is better, Bradley Beal or Klay Thompson, and I think it was 64% or 66%, so 2/3 Klay Thompson. In your view, is Klay Thompson better than Bradley Beal? Because that ties into the conversation here with the Heat.
I'm cheating a little bit because I listened to you guys' pod last night, so forgive me that I'm probably echoing a little bit of what you guys said, but I'm taking Beal. And the reason why I'm taking Beal is because I'm a lot more confident in what he can do at the rim. Nobody is better at what he does than Klay Thompson, and he's phenomenal, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. I think especially with this Heat team and what they need, I think you need somebody else who can get his own shot and get to the rim and make you a little bit more dangerous. And maybe I'm looking at this a little bit too much through the lens of who would be best for the Heat right now, and looking at the way their roster is constructed. But I also think, guys, you asked this question to start your podcast last night, and the one before this, if you're obviously not listening to this as it's being recorded. But during your Bradley Beal podcast, you started off by asking, is Bradley Beal a superstar? Bradley Beal gives you superstar production, legit superstar production. He's not a superstar name. And I qualify superstars by, do my mom and my wife know who this person is? They know who Russell Westbrook is. They know who Klay Thompson is because the Warriors are on TV all the time. They don't know who Bradley Beal is. But Bradley Beal, I think, is a better player than Klay Thompson. And that's just kind of when you talk about a superstar, it's who transcends. Beal doesn't transcend yet, but I think he will when he gets into the right situation. And for Heat fans, hopefully that's Miami.
And he'll never transcend in Washington. And that's why I called him a budding superstar, because I feel like he is on that verge. And like you said, he needs to be in the right situation. Yep. Where he's at right now, the Wizards don't get on TV. I mean, even the Heat barely got on TV, but at least the Heat had Dwayne Wade last year. The Heat have championship pedigree. I mean, what does Washington really have? So I wanted to kind of ask both of you guys, what did you take away from today? Because being around Ethan more lately has kind of hit me to the game a little bit on this reporting. Because all I saw coming out of Washington today was a bunch of PR spin BS. This whole idea that they brought him in to the, to the draft room to look at prospects. I mean, the Heat were picking Shabazz Napier because they thought it would make LeBron happy. I don't care about any of that stuff.
How'd that work out?
Right, exactly. How did that work out? So what did you guys think of what was coming out of Washington today? Is it legit? Is it something that Heat fans should say, oh, man, Bradley Beal's not leaving? Because, honestly, and Clay, we went back and forth on this on Twitter, not arguing, but we kind of agreed that, OKC fans probably thought Paul George was a Thunder lifer 2 months ago. So what did you guys think of what was coming out of Washington today?
You want to start, Ethan?
No, you go ahead, and then I'll clean up.
I agree with you. I thought the whole thing was absolutely PR spin, and look, you better be doing everything to make Bradley Beal happy, because he is far and away the only chance that you have to be relevant anytime soon if he wants to stick around there. So the only thing that came out today and this was my fault, that I wasn't aware of how crazy the numbers were and how soon he can sign the Supermax contract with Washington. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it would have to be with Washington. But the thing that stood out to me in that Rhodes report was that he could sign a $254 million Supermax next summer. So it wasn't so much any of what we heard today from Ted Leonsis or Shepard or any of that. The fact that they brought him into the draft room, that's fine. I mean, you darn well better do that if you want to keep Bradley Beal around. But for me, and I always try to put myself in the shoes of athletes as I've gotten older and I've got a family. When I was a kid, I was like, oh yeah, take the hometown discount, go to my team. But as you get older and you have kids, you have a family, you're like, man, you got a lot of people you got to take care of. It would be really hard for me to turn down $254 million. So that's the only reason that when things came out today, I was like, ugh, man, that's gonna be awfully tough. They're gonna be having a lot of recruiting going on for them to convince him to turn down $254 million even to come to Miami.
But Clay, what I think has happened here is I think that a lot of NBA guys have realized that comfort and relevance are more important than the dollars once you get past a certain amount. And I think, there was this feeling that the Supermax would get everybody to stay where they were, and some guys did. But I don't think it's the case for everybody. And Alf hit it on the head earlier. Washington should be a good basketball market, but it's never been. When I used to go up there, the only place that I could think of, major cities in the country that had less of a home court advantage than Washington, was Atlanta. Those were the two places where they were always rooting for the Heat. I mean, in Washington, it was during the Big Three era, but it was not just the Big Three era. I mean, I remember being up there in the 15-16 season, and the whole place, I mean, it was half full, but it was all Heat fans.
It's still now. It
is. They've never embraced that. It's a Redskins town. It's never. The Nationals have picked up there a little bit. The Capitals get a following. The Wizards don't. They just don't. Georgetown, had a following for a long time, obviously, and they've tried to bring that back. But it's not. It's a cavernous arena. I mean, they've built up the area around it, around Chinatown and everything. But it's just not. There's no feeling there. And I just everything I've heard about Bradley Beal, and I don't know him. I've interviewed him a handful of times. I don't know him, but everything I've heard about him from Florida and other places is that winning and relevance do matter to him. And so I think he might pass on the money. I think this is, I think he's been flirting lately on Twitter. I mean, the stuff with Dwayne and all that, like, I think there's something there. And also, I said this on the podcast yesterday. I think it's odd, Clay. I mean, you've been here long enough to know there's no Jimmy Butler press conference scheduled. Like, yeah. Right? I mean, yeah. I
wondered if that was because of his vacation and him.
Well, it was at first. It was at first, but now, I mean, okay, so he's not going to do anything before the end of July. What are they waiting on? Like,
No, we were, because they had the conference call shortly after it happened, and I get it. I mean, you print guys, Ethan. You old school print guys. You guys.
I'm not a print guy anymore. I'm not a print guy anymore. Print is,
but they do it
dead, Clay. Print is dead.
That's a whole other podcast right there.
Yeah.
But by the way, I like it that you pointed out that I'm a greedy jerk and that I'm only in it for the money, and that NBA players are far smarter than me, which they are. No, I did find that interesting, Ethan, as well. I do think, look, there have been a number of people who – there's a reason why Bradley Beal and Miami keep coming up together. And I don't think it's simply because everybody knows how badly Pat Riley wants Bradley Beal. And it was funny. We would watch Heat games. This was think this was in January. It was leading up to the deadline. And I remember you could see Pat Riley courtside, and he would move over. You would see him watching Wizards games.
Oh, I know.
So,
I know.
I mean,
Clay, we had a spy. There's a guy who follows us. I probably shouldn't reveal this. I won't say his name, but he sits directly above him. So what he would do is every game, he would send me a DM with them watching the Minnesota game, like him sitting there. So, right? So there's Andy there, and that's all. They'd be watching Jimmy Butler the whole time. But yes, then they switched to Bradley Beal. They started watching Bradley Beal.
Yeah. So I don't think this is any. It's out there, and I think everybody knows. And by the way, I think you're right too. I mean, the stuff where the two people, he's not on Twitter very much. Maybe a tweet maybe a couple of tweets a day, if that. Usually, it's just retweeting stuff with his. I think he has an AAU team that he's got in St. Louis. But then he retweets Dwayne Wade and Chad Ochocinco. The two guys, Chad Ocho, who has been publicly recruiting him harder than anyone, and Dwayne, who was his idol growing up, and who he wears number 3 in honor of. And I mean, he knows that. So I mean, either they're really playing a game with the Heat, because I'm sure he's too smart to have this be any sort of an accident. Either they're playing a little bit of a game with Heat fans, which who knows? I mean, that could be going on as well. Or they're doing what Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade did 2 nights or a night or 3 nights before he ultimately agreed to a deal with the Heat. And so,
you don't think "Hey Big Head" was coincidental at that point?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. and that was the other one with Bam coming out and doing that. I mean, they are obviously, everybody knows this, people in the organization, and clearly Bam didn't do that just because, hey, look, Bradley Beal happened to be tweeting 7 years ago about the Miami Heat. I'll just make a joke here. No, I mean, this is all of this stuff. There's something there. The question is enough there for Bradley Beal to decide that sticking it out for a year and trying to go for the $254 million Supermax next year is worth it. And B, and I think you guys have said this over and over, he would have to go to Wizards management and request a trade and likely one to Miami. And otherwise, guys, I given what the Heat have, I don't see how they compete with other teams in a trade for Bradley Beal, strictly for Bradley Beal. It would have
Clay, it is what Pat said. Guys have to ask out these days. That's the only way that this stuff happens. All right, we've got only a minute and a half left because I didn't pay the upgraded Zoom bill because we're trying to bring in more advertising here. So I'm just going to let you do this in a minute or less, okay, Clay? Alf and I are both doing this. Roster as it stands now, no other moves. Heat finish where in the East?
5th or 6th. They're going to compete for 5th. And I'm not a big believer in Indy. I think they're going to start to tail off a little bit, especially we don't know when Oladipo is going to come back. I think you're pretty safe right now in assuming that it's going to be Milwaukee and Philly up at the top. I think Toronto is going to be better than people are giving them credit for. I don't know how the Boston thing is going to work. I'm sure they're going to be good, but I don't know if they're going to be top 2 or 3 good. But after that, I really think, guys, that you could see them compete with all the rest of those teams, and especially since Durant's going to be out all year, it might take them a little bit of a little while to get used to everybody. So yeah, I'd say 5th or 6th in the East. All
right, Alf, you got 3 seconds. Want to add something?
Heat are going to be 3rd.
Wow. That's clearer than it was yesterday. What the hell did they do overnight?
I don't know. I don't believe that. I wanted to say something controversial.
All right, that's good. All right, controversial. Clay, thanks for joining us. You were a much better guest than Will would have been and much more handsome than Sedano. We appreciate the time. And, anytime you want to have me on 10, man, I'll tell Pete Pasquale and Shapiro and Donovan I can't make it. It's up to you.
I'll tell you what, we'll pay you 10 times what we pay our normal guests.
So 0.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Take care.
Before we close today's episode, I want to tell you about another of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You know them well by now. It's the law office of Seltzer Mayberg. You can find them at onecalllegal.com. That's onecalllegal.com, or call 1-855-5000-LAW. They handle cases including, but not limited to, car accidents, slip and falls, and traffic tickets with a new 15,000 square foot office opening on I-95 in North Miami. They handle cases from all over the state. Call now with 24/7 service for a free consultation. That's onecalllegal.com, 1-855 5000 Law.